Hello, what is up guys? It's your boy Shieldcoomer, aka Sirigath, and in this video in particular we're gonna be covering Nokhund Offensive 23 on a Tyrannical week. I've been scrolling through my YouTube uploads and I realized I have not been uploading Nokhund except the very first 20 I did. And I actually wanted to kind of like share what I relearned since then, you know, about this dungeon, and you know, just hopefully, you know, help some of you out. You know, hopefully it'll be fun to watch as well. It's a pretty long one.
Disruptive shout.
That's what she said. But it's also a very fun video. Very fun dungeon is what I meant to say. As I watch this, I realize I have not cast my fortitude at all in this dungeon. None of us have stamina buff. Yikes, that is trolling straight up. I used to have a very good add-on for this. Well, I mean, weak aura that used to tell me when to cast it. It would activate anytime anybody dies or anything. I have just forgotten to get it again. I really need to get it. It's also useful for the raid, you know, when somebody gets combat res or something, it will remind you to sort of like rebuff and stuff. It's pretty neat. I've gotten out of habit of casting. Like I'm trying to train myself. I have this like, it's not OCD, but I have like this compulsive need to constantly rebuff, and it's really bad because it actually does cost you quite a bit of mana to rebuff, so you know it's not a very wise decision. Anyway, I should talk about what's happening because these packs are actually pretty tricky, especially on the raging. So basically the way these packs work is, one thing you need to pay attention to is the Okuna War something, the bird. It's a small mob. It has the least amount of HP out of them all, but it will absolutely slaughter you. The way it works is, I believe it targets a ranged player, which will in a lot of cases be you as a healer, and when it does, it will fixate, and there's not much you can do about it except for run away and kite. Now ideally, there it is, it's a War Ohuna, right? War Ohuna. Now ideally, if your team is, you know, good, and if they're, you know, paying attention, you know, you will use things as, you know, DK Grip, Vortex, Roots, Stuns, or you can just nuke it down first so it doesn't, you know, run the risk of like killing someone. But that is something that you do want to be careful of, so just keep in mind, if you do have like a standard weak aura package, it will tell you when you're fixated, run, and it will tell you if somebody else is fixated, in which case tell them to run and help them CC the mob. You can hear it, you can root it, not much else you can do except for, you know, but you will not outkill the damage on a 20 plus, it will two-shot basically, so be mindful. That's all I'm gonna say about it. Be mindful, just be aware that it can happen. Second next thing, which is really tricky for us actually, on fortified a little bit less, but on tyrannical a little bit less, but on fortified this is an absolute problem. These guys actually hit really hard, and these war spear guys, they will jump to a ranged player and they will bleed. It will always be, I think, the person that's the furthest away. So you can actually kind of manipulate this and rotate whoever he has CDs. Correct me if I'm wrong, it might be random, but I do believe it is the one that's standing out the furthest.
War Stomp.
That's what you need to pay attention to. Also, you know, as always, I recommend, as a priest, do stand relatively close to the mobs, just so you can spread everything, so you can shoot your divine star at the proper angles. And more importantly, so you can fear. Don't forget, fear is such a powerful utility that I've often seen people underuse. And here, as I wasn't paying attention, I think I've eaten an arrow, this swirly on the floor, which has killed me. I was a bit focused on keeping the other guy alive, and I just did not notice them underneath my feet, and I died. So these are the things you need to be careful of. It's a great lesson, I guess, for the future. Do be mindful of this dot. It does hurt quite a bit, and since we do not have a way to remove this dot, I actually highly recommend keeping a pain sub, even for people like this on a fortified week. Your tanks should be fine here. They should be fine. Sometimes I've seen tanks die on these packs, but not as often as DPS does, so it is something to be kind of like mindful of. Keep in mind, you know, that it can happen. But other than that, you should prioritize, especially playing with Blood DK, you should prioritize keeping up your raid group. On this boss in particular, I actually like to be the one that does ballistas, even though we as priests lack some like mobility and it really isn't very fun to do this. I do think that the overall for the group, the least amount of DPS lost would be for a healer to do it, which is often the case, right? For many mechanics we say this, such as explosive and stuff, so this applies as well in this case. Who will lose, you know, the least from that movement? I mean, obviously it's us from channeling, obviously it's us because we provide the least amount of damage regardless. Now I did hear that some people have these problems where they feel like while they're running to the ballista, the group takes this AoE hit and then, you know, people tend to panic and stuff. I will give you two advices actually. First is, as a disc you can apply atonements and then your HOTS will heal, and you can also throw a penance while you're running. Use Mindbender, there's all these ways you can heal up. Second of all, you can also put barrier for them to stand in. Third, you can use rupture. So we do have tools to deal with it, you know. On higher keys I'm pretty sure that these things hit much harder, and at that point it probably does become sort of an issue where they will get one shot if they don't have something up, but even for that we can prepare. So I'm assuming, you know, for all these like up to like 25s, so like you should be fine. They shouldn't get one shot, and realistically there's no damage happening in between, so there's just nothing to worry about. It just looks scary, but you just heal them up quickly as soon as you're done and you do your job. So no problems there. Don't worry guys, like there's no damage happening. I know like sometimes it's scary and stuff, and DPS molds if they're not full health all the time, but a sign of a good healer is not like okay, I'm reluctant to say a sign of a good healer is not always keeping everybody up, because that's not really true, especially not in pugs. But needlessly healing is also not like the optimal use of your resources. Don't forget, as healers, especially now with the new patch with the gems and stuff, we can do some serious damage, guys, especially you as this. You have that potential, and you do require globals to be expanded for this damage, unlike our friendly, you know, evoker friends that everybody loves. No hate evokers, by the way. Evoker is a fun class. Love evokers, but we do need to spend our globals to deal damage. So that means that, you know, if you're needlessly healing, you're wasting DPS, and in hierarchies that is suboptimal. Don't do it. And second tip I would give for this is use ballista as soon as possible, every single time, because if you do this, you will actually run in front of the mechanics, and you will be able to prevent some of these AoE stuns. Because if you just wait all the time, like if you're waiting even a little bit, you will eat a couple of these AoEs unnecessary, and once again that means needlessly having to heal group. They will not die most likely, but you will end up needlessly healing the group, and because of that you will lose out on damage, and because of that you will, you know, lose out on time, and you know it is M+, so I would not recommend it. So just use it as soon as possible, and also don't forget that the ballistas do deal damage, so the sooner you use it, the sooner you deal damage, and the cycle repeats. Because as far as I know, the sooner you cast it, the earlier the guy spawns. Now correct me if I'm wrong, I've never seen anybody hold ballistas or anything like that, so I wouldn't know, to be honest. I'm kind of just like thinking, you know, trying to use logic in a video game. But that's what I think, that's how I think it works. So just use it as soon as possible. There's no reason to hold it. It's good, trust me. Anyway, here, don't forget to don't take balls unless you have to, especially on Tyrannical, you know, leave DPS to take it. Sometimes on Fortified I actually like to take a ball or two here, so I get that extra little bit of DPS and HPS. And don't forget guys, for us the increase in DPS is also increase in HPS, so it works double, it double dip. I believe it double dips, because sometimes atonements have weird interactions, sometimes certain bonuses don't apply and stuff like that. I'm not a mathematician. If I wanted, you know, to be a mathematician, I wouldn't be playing this game, I would be in school. So, you know, I do believe that, you know, increase in damage does ultimately increase your healing as you know, on this, so that is kind of how it works. I'm just gonna like apply that logic and say that it does get some value on you on fortified weeks. However, on Tyrannical weeks, definitely leave it to DPS, of course, unless, because a lot of times in pugs I just see people not wanting to pick it up. I don't know if they don't notice them or they just forget or what's up with that. But if I was a DPS and I see like an orb that gives me like plus 5% or whatever, how much it is, it's like 5 per orb, I think, I'd be all over that bitch, you know what I'm saying? Like, there ain't no way you're not seeing me with as many balls as I can take. But yeah, here overall, you know, what's coming in clutch here is the targeting weak aura. I mean, you can see here like who it's targeting with the lightning, storm bolt. Sorry, called lightning. It's called storm bolt. And then you also have an arcing strike. I would say like it's important to know how these abilities work, but really it's not. In a sense that they all hit pretty hard, and all you have to do is heal and stop like your group from dying regardless. Obviously, if you're playing in an organized group, you can assign your fear to a certain rotation, but if you're playing with pugs, just fear whatever you can, because really you need a lot of interrupts here. And as you can see, playing with druids sucks for that specific reason, is because druids do not have an interrupt, or rather they have a great interrupt, but it's not a low cooldown interrupt. So once they cast it and the things live after that, they're useless. So not useless, they still have some things, but overall, like, you know, priest and boomkin are scary combo. I thought about this before. If you're a priest and you see boomkin in your group, be very careful with casts, because that just means you basically have two classes that have suboptimal interrupts.
Storm shield.
And it is something you need to take into account, you know, because in some dungeons you don't need interrupts actually almost at all. Like 2 interrupts will do. I think good example of this is Azure Vault. I think Azure Vault, like once you get past first like 4 groups, there's basically like no interrupts that are needed. So actually that's not true, there's still those like sleeps and stuff, but like it's not that big of a deal, you know. It's not as scary as some other dungeons in which you absolutely have to interrupt some things. I would definitely say there's less emphasis on interrupts this season than in Shadowlands. Shadowlands had a lot of packs and mobs where if you don't interrupt, you just wipe. I think in this season, it's mostly just like you're basically like killing your healer and their fingers if you're not interrupting. And if you're doing that, then that means the healer is doing less damage. And then, you know, the domino effect falls in place. And I've been on this... you know, I've been saying this for so long now, and in every single video, that like I kind of feel like if anybody's watching, you know, multiple of my videos, they're probably sick of hearing this by now. But you know, one GCD
tempest
from your DPS to interrupt this, not only does it eliminate the threat of somebody potentially dying, but it also saves you a couple of globals, which in turn gives your group DPS and lets you prepare for more difficult things to heal and stuff. And there's actually a lot to heal in this season, so I would definitely say like interrupts are important still. You know, just because I said they're less important does not mean they're not important. Very important, you know, distinguishment between the two. It is, you know, less important than something and not important are two entirely different things. Anyway, try to purge here. I mean, it helps.
Storm shield.
I believe this dungeon was done after nerf to the storm. Not 100% sure actually. Somebody might
5, 4,
maybe
3.
double check that. But after this most recent nerf, this storm is very healable for this as well. We did use the struggle on Tyrannical keys on this. It was very difficult to heal. You actually needed like perfectly planned everything working out like the way you wanted to in order to kill these storms. Now it's still difficult, it's still very stressful, and you rely on your DPS to position themselves correctly, proper defensives, not overcommit to one storm and then be completely dry to the second storm. But if you are in an organized group with players that do know what they're doing, you would find that storms are not actually that scary, and I'll explain why. It's because it's same logic as with Hirja.
Empowered.
It's all about assigning things, right? It's same as Mythic raiding, for example, and I think this is why a lot of people struggle. They're not familiar with the toolkits and stuff. You know, they just want to play the game and not really think about these things, and I respect that. You know, I at the end of the day, I used to be like that as well. You know, it takes some time, like learning everything about every class and stuff, but tracking defensives and stuff is really important. It can be oftentimes the difference between life and death. And one thing I've been wanting to do is I also add health stones and health pot tracker into my Omni CD. I can't believe that I don't have that by now. It feels like such a fundamental thing to have as a healer, considering how strong health pots are right now, guys. Health pots are broken. Please don't let like saving 50 gold per week keep you from timing keys. The amount of times I have seen people die with pots off cooldown
Search of power
to like 7k dots or something is actually triggering. Like, especially when you're playing with a spec like this, we do not have big instant heals. Having that instant heal, even for yourself, you know, like as a healer, you will see me for sure, I think, use a health pot at some point during this storm. Maybe even on this first one, we were kind of dropping low here. But look at this, like, look at this. And I didn't even, like, I was scared to pop my Shadow Covenant, but that was a mistake there.
Energy surge.
I think. But I did feel like I needed that balance instantly. And as you can see, like, it's about 100k HPS needed to get through each storm. Obviously the first one with Lust is a little bit easier. Second one you have to deal with Outlast, and you will see how we've dealt with it this time. I'm also purging here, probably not everyone. I think I'll leave some purges for the others as well usually. But yeah, the actual tricky part of this fight is these lightning strikes that happen in between. They hurt quite a bit, and it's very important you don't overcommit to resource spending in between these hits, because it does look scary, but I think you will find that like just with passive damage and atonements on everybody, most of the time you will be able to keep the group up and and like kind of like maintain high health and stuff. And here I'm just kind of like panicking a little bit. I'm taking all the balls and stuff. That was, I mean, Druid made the correct decision. He didn't want to let's get through the storm first. Okay, so like Radiance, as you can see here, and then Schism, Shadow Covenant, Dark Reprimand, and then like I'll go in a little bit into healing mode. You will usually get a proc or two of your flash heal here, and as you can see, like now with the nerfs, pre-nerfs we were dead there. With the nerfs we were fine. We're dead obviously because I'm counting on, you know, less damage. I mean, I'm not, you know, I would obviously heal more if I felt like, you know, we were gonna take more damage. So I'm not saying I wouldn't be able to heal it without nerfs. I'm just saying that nerfs definitely like matter a lot, and they've definitely changed this fight a lot. I want to tell you guys about one interaction that I've not talked about enough this expansion, and it's because I have personally undervalued it quite a bit, but as now as I'm pushing higher, I think it's became like one of the strongest tools in my kit in order to deal with higher level dungeons. And that is, so like the logic is like every time you get a flash flash heal proc, you kind of want to heal somebody else so you get those two atonements, right? More HPS value and whatnot, right? Well, that applies. That is definitely true. You will see here, like let's watch this. So like Mind Blast, Shadow Covenant, just chill, popping the Mindbender. I think you should precast Mindbender. I think it's a wasted global while the damage is going. I think that's a mistake I very commonly make. Something I've been trying to get better at. And okay, like boss is pretty much dead now, so I'll talk a little bit about this interaction a little bit more. So there's a talent, right, that I think is default in most builds, and it basically says if you flash heal yourself, you take 10% less damage for, I don't know, X amount of seconds. I think it's like 10. That is insane. That talent is, it's insane how strong it is, and that talent is like more worth than a lot of the talents at the even like the bottom rows at the end of the tree in our class tree. For sure utilize that, because the amount of hits on high dungeons that happen that have almost one-shot potential that happen after. And here I'm not griefing the group, by the way. Thanks at pull birds, so I was like, which birds? Surely he doesn't mean these ones, because I got confused for a second. Then I remembered he thinks like the patrol birds, which we'll get in a second. But basically, I don't know if he actually meant those. Maybe he did. I don't know. I was too scared to pull them because I don't think he linked the route at the start, so I just didn't know, didn't want to screw it up, right? Like, it's better to lose like 30 seconds than to pull something he can't handle and then die, and then it will turn into a flame fiesta as it usually does. But just kind of like chilling, you know, with that talent I was talking about. I want to finish that kind of like narrative because I think it's very important. It's one of the strongest talents I've seen, I think, in most trees. The amount of reduction you can do with that very simple spell on yourself is crazy. And it is, I'm not gonna lie guys, it is kind of hard to fit it in the moment where everybody takes damage, because it's like you never want to really cast that thing on yourself. You usually at those times want to prepare for your Shadow Covenant ramp, and you want to prepare for your Mindbender, you know, DPS with radiances in between and stuff like that. I'm talking about like high damage situations such as, I mean, Storm here was a great example on the Raging Tempest, but also like Hirja on Halls of Valor. We're talking like a second and third boss in Court of Stars, where you have these segments where, you know, you're taking a lot of damage at the times, and you just want to kind of like, you know, heal everybody basically. In those cases it feels very weird to cast that on yourself, but actually if you do cast it on yourself and you have that reduction, you basically don't have to worry about yourself almost at all, especially if you combine that with Desperate Prayer and Fade. So I would highly recommend paying a little bit more attention to that specific interaction and kind of trying to utilize it to the best of your ability. It is very important because it is such a strong tool. 10%, I believe it's 10%. I'm actually gonna double check now. But I do believe it is 10% damage reduction that you get, and it is just so strong, guys. I mean, no reason in not casting it. And I mean, in these packs, like honestly, on a Tyrannical week, there's really not much to talk about. I mean, one thing you do want to pay attention to is Raging, and there's one interaction that you kind of want to keep in mind, and that is Raging plus Soul Rend, Soul Rip. What is it called? The ability basically that says that you get clapped by, you know, 3 people get clapped and their souls get separated, so you gotta pick it up to get your damage back. Yeah, well, that specifically you kind of have to pay attention to that, because if they're raging and they cast that, it will hurt, but it probably won't kill you unless you're doing really high keys. So yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it is. It says that reduces all damage you take by 10% for 10 seconds. It's insane. Protective Light, guys. It is. This talent is completely nuts. And from darkness comes light. Seems good, but it's like this talent is just so much better. It's basically 10% DR for 1 GCD, 1 second cast. It's crazy. It is a little bit of a sacrifice, so I wouldn't like suggest spamming it needlessly, but when you know there's like big, you know, 1 tappers potentially incoming, definitely use that and utilize it. I've been just kind of like getting into it myself, to be honest. I've underestimated how strong the talent is. I've not really been utilizing it as much, so I do want to emphasize it now. Unfortunately, you know, how do I say it? Unfortunately, it does feel like so late into the tier, you know. You'd maybe expect it, you know, for somebody to play Disc as much as I do to at least kind of like be more aware of it. But you know, it is what it is. I mean, we're all human at the end of the day. You know, I never claim to be an all-knowing person. I've always tried to kind of like explain this in my videos, that I do not upload these videos to kind of like you know, appear like I'm some sort of pro or something. I'm just a guy pushing keys with pugs. Like, I am pretty dedicated to it and committed, and I do enjoy it a lot. And I don't want to like undersell myself either. I am quite knowledgeable. I mean, I'm a pretty highly ranked disc player. There's not a lot of us this season, you know, so that might kind of diminish that achievement at the moment. But I mean, I've also pushed on other specs and other classes, and like I would say like I at least feel like, you know, at the very least I have rights to comment on my own videos and stuff. And you know, I always say like I hope it's helpful to you guys. You know, I hope somebody can watch these videos. Potentially maybe they're struggling with certain mechanics and stuff, and they can learn how to deal with them from me, or maybe they can see some mistakes I'm doing, and also like just watching my own replays while making these videos also helps me become better. So that is, it's just overall very beneficial thing to do, and I really enjoy making these videos. So you know, I hope you guys enjoy watching them as well. I am trying my best. But yes, see here, like this boss is actually really hard for disc. You will see. This boss is really not very fun. I feel like one thing disc still struggles with is this uncontrollable RNG consistent damage. And like I'll give an example, right? Like, because I'm also playing Evoker, and I'm also pushed pretty high on Evoker. My Evoker has pretty much caught up to my disc. It's up there. It's sitting at like 2.9k at the moment, and my disc is at 3.1, so it's not quite there yet, but that's like basically like 2 weeks, so not even 2 weeks, it's 1 week of like just try harding a little bit, and it's basically there. Evoker is just so much easier to play with. The amount of healing you just get passively from a bunch of like things such as temporal anomaly, just throwing reversions and stuff is frightening. I don't know how they tested that class and said, okay, this is balanced. Like just to kind of put emphasis on how broken Evoker is, they've nerfed the spec like 5 times already, I think, and it is still probably #1, right? Like I don't know how it compares against Resto Druid. I think they're both up there, like they're both crazy good. I've also started playing the Resto now a little bit. I just wanted to kind of like see how it is, and I actually ended up liking it way more than I expected, both of these specs don't struggle on this boss in particular. They're good at like covering this type of damage, which is like consistent but random outgoing damage on random players. However, for us, this is actually like you can see like my group is constantly low. It is constantly low, and it is pretty. I'm having like a pretty hard time keeping everybody up. I'm expending quite a bit of mana as well. Like luckily I have Chill Globe and I've had Innervate earlier, but without that this would be very unfun. So one thing I would recommend is like spamming your Radiance here. Just spam it all the time, because for Gale Arrow you need to anyway commit a CD for the most part. Here I was late with Rupture. I don't know if it just got off or I was simply late, but it was pretty bad. But just spam your Radiance. Obviously don't spam it, like use it when you know more than one person is injured, but like you will have to spam it in order to keep people up. So you know, use it and try to use it in conjunction with your Mindbender, and obviously then do your don't be lazy, do your like proper ramp rotation. You know, I talked about it a lot earlier in the season, but I'll say it again. You know, for me the best way I found to maximize my damage on that is I will throw Radiance, I will throw Mindbender, and then I will Mind Blast, Schism, Shadow Covenant, Mind Blast, Dark Reprimand, or rather your Penance. And then again Mind Blast, and then I will refresh the dot, or I will refresh it in between some of these casts just to trigger like stronger dark school. and just, you know, try to win as much as you can, light and dark, but obviously sometimes you cannot simply interrupt your, you just cannot afford to interrupt your healing part of rotation. Unfortunately, it all depends on what's happening really, but you'll get a feel for it anyway. This is how I found that maximizing my damage works pretty well.
4, 3.
As you can see, like, this fight pretty insane in terms of like how much HPS needs to be done. It is pretty hefty one, and there's constantly healing needing to be done and stuff, so
Swift wind.
I would sort of say be prepared for that, you know, because people tend to underestimate this boss. It really does look easy. It seems like, oh, it's just two mobs that are just like running around and casting some like negligible spells, but at the end of the day, the boss hurts a lot, and don't underestimate it, especially not on Tyrannical. It's also, I've had the pleasure of playing it on Grievous week as well. On Grievous, the boss is an absolute menace, and definitely one of the harder bosses I've killed. So yeah, just a couple of things to keep in mind. You know, be prepared for a rough healing. It is definitely doable with proper preparation and stuff, but I would say, like, do not underestimate them. They're quite difficult.
Chant of the Dead.
And as we head into, you know, the final stages of this key, I would like to talk a little bit about last boss.
Swift wind.
So basically for the last boss, I mean, things are pretty simple but also pretty tricky. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind that are going to happen on the last boss, which you will have to pay attention to. I usually like to talk about things while they're happening, but I might make an exception now because, you know, we're doing this flight, so I could just like preemptively speak about it a little bit. So here's the deal. Right. The boss basically will have a hard hitting tank ability that will apply a bleed on your tank. Since you're a priest, you don't have a way to remove that. So unless your tank has a way to deal with that, you will have to do some heavy healing on the tank, especially in Tyrannical weeks and high keys. Second thing that's going to happen is your DPS will get a circle. Your DPS will get hit really, really hard, and then the boss will pull all of you to the circle, and then it will charge. So these are kind of like the two things that you need to pay attention to. I would highly recommend at least power word shielding the guy that's targeted initially. At the very least, maybe even some paints up, or just like make sure they're topped up fully. You cannot joke around with that. They can get one shot. They might have to use their defenses as well. Second thing that's going to happen is, I just want to kind of like get a little bit out of what I'm saying right now and just talk about this pull here. See how I'm trying to position myself so that if the charge happens, it happens. I mean, not if, when the charge happens, it happens towards the wall.
Empowered.
And we've kind of failed at that quite a bit, and I almost got killed here as well. So just something to be careful about. And you can do some decent damage here. There shouldn't be much healing on this anyway. It's a good opportunity to do some damage. Alright, second thing to talk about the final boss is he will do that AoE. It basically looks like quaking. It circles around everyone, and then it will hit hard, and at the same time he will also be throwing his frontal, like a ground frontal cone sort of thing, similar to how this Balak, or whatever he's called, Batak, is doing. So yeah, just dodge that, but also make sure that everybody's topped up, because it will hit hard, as you will see on Tyrannical. It hits very hard. Everybody needs to be topped up, and make sure that you're not pulling, make sure that you're not running at the same time in the same place with other DPS, because the circles will deal a lot of damage. If you basically overlap with anyone, you will die. I don't think any defenses can save you in that case. So
Empowered.
Might be something that's worth rupturing. I personally like to save rupture for intermission, because the real struggle of this boss fight ultimately is the intermission. As you can see, tank, this is a blood DK, so he can mostly deal with these things. He'll just pop some defensives, heal up. And I don't know why this guy isn't going because he's okay, because he's a hunter. Casting hunters.
Rending strike.
But yeah, so you can see rending strike crits quite a bit. I actually commit a whole penance there. Might be an overkill. And see, here happens what I talked about. We barely avoided a disaster there. That was the guy lapped over me and saved us. But I have died like this. I have lost keys because of that. So I would highly suggest pre-positioning and determining who's gonna run where and stuff like that, just to be sure. No messing around with this. And here you guys did a good job at like basically nullifying this mechanic completely with, I'm assuming they were using like shadow melds and vanishes and paint that and whatever else these tricky agility users do. You know how it is. And here you, again, dodge, and we're for some reason close, so you can see me like I run away from them because I want to make sure that we don't overlap. It's just something to be mindful of. It's not scary, but it is something you need to be careful of because it will kill you, and I mean it will kill 2 people, so it really does turn into a disaster if it happens. I doubt that you'll have like, I mean, you might actually have 2 battle reses to burn at this point, but why would you, right, if you don't have to? Because the real scary part of the fight is this. And as you can see, we don't even have like lust for this. And this damage is pretty insane. You need some strong healing here. I would highly recommend telling people to stick together.
5.
You can pop some barrier, you can pop rupture, obviously use your shadow fiend, and then you can do your damage reputation into the ads and hope that's enough. If it's not enough, then I don't know what to tell you. Then good luck. Reroll evoker, I guess, or druid. But it's, yeah, you can basically commit every single CD that exists in that for that particular moment of the fight, which is good. That's what discs excel at. So do that. Make sure you're basically insta dispelling this debuff. It does get quite hard, and it also leaves a nasty dot. And then this is also another thing to talk about. This is just kind of like a mimic of the previous mechanic that he had in phase 1. Except this time it also leaves pools around him, around you actually, around players. There's definitely like ways to optimize this mechanic as well, like stacking together and then kind of like moving, like so you leave puddles of the specific areas in the map, so you're not all kind of like, you see how here it's like ugly spread, it's kind of hard to maneuver, it's taking so much space without actually like any need for it. But ultimately it doesn't really matter. Just don't sit in that storm because you can die to it, obviously. It will deal a lot of damage. I think it also silences you, I think. I can't remember, I don't know. I think it does silence. And here you can see like cool, you know, anti-magic shell tricks. Warriors can also spell reflect this. That's why warriors are really good for this particular boss. I mean, warriors are good for anything, but Paladin seems to be flavor of the month at the moment, especially with like the reworks and stuff. But yeah, the good old trusty warrior is still very strong, and I wouldn't underestimate the ability to just not only nullify a complete like mechanic of a boss, but also turn it against him. And as you can see, everything else is pretty chill. Just make sure people are topped up. You can even rupture one of these if it's back. Just chilling, just dealing the PPS, keeping your tank alive, and making sure that you're dispelling instantly. Anyway guys, I want to say thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. You know, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment if you know, you feel like you want to. It would mean a lot to me. Thank you for supporting the channel. Much love guys, good luck. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Appreciate the feedback, and bye bye.